So DC has had a bit of a rough year so far. I think we can all agree. This has been one of their years where they've put out a fair amount of content, and with each release, at least theatrically, things have seemingly gotten worse and worse. And with one more film this year, finally looking to release in December with Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom, I kind of want to talk about DC a little bit, talk about the state they're in this year, what has maybe brought them to this state, and whether or not Aquaman 2 is going to be affected by this, or will it kind of sail on through and just about squeeze by as a functional and also professionally made, and also, most importantly, a fiscally respectable release by the time it comes in December. So this year with DC, it kind of started in a bit of an odd place, didn't it? I mean, obviously, when we got to around January time, we knew already by that point that James Gunn and Peter Safran had taken over as the new heads of DC. Obviously, we had only a couple months prior to that, we had all the Black Adam drama and The Rock potentially taking over, or at least rumoured to be. And then once Black Adam came out and didn't perform all that well, the top brass at DC changed everything around, and now we're getting James Gunn coming in to completely relaunch the DC universe. And back in January, we got James Gunn coming out to talk about his first slate of DC projects, Phase 1 or Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. And I have done a live stream where I talked with my friend Commie Chris about it, and we discussed all that, and that was good fun. And the slate, while cool and exciting, and there's certain projects within that that I think sound really interesting and really exciting, I also was confused because it's not really a complete reboot from what we can see because of projects like Waller, which has been confirmed to have Amanda Viola Davis returning in the role. Where did I get Amanda from? Oh, Amanda Waller, yeah. But yeah, Viola Davis confirmed to be returning. It just made everything very, very confusing. And of course, he announced all this with still 4 big DC movies still to come out this year that were supposedly a part of the old continuity. And I feel like that going into each and every single release, there's been these questions of, is this a part of the new universe? Is it not? Are these characters being left behind? Are they being brought over? And it was kind of hard to tell based on that initial announcement. I mean, James Gunn did say that Shazam! Fury of the Gods was going to be a part of it, at least originally, and then The Flash was going to be the reset point. But it's been an interesting road getting to this, and I feel like, you know, when we were visiting each of these films as they were coming out, it just kind of made audiences more and more confused. So let's just go through each of these films one by one. Let's start off with Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Now, I love the original Shazam. It's my favourite DCEU film. I love the original, so I was excited for the sequel. I mean, the trailers, to be fair, didn't do a lot for me. I thought, yeah, it looks good, but nothing really more than that. But then when the movie came out and I watched it, I had a blast with it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good fun. I don't think it's quite as good as the first, but it's still really, really good. And I think that this film expands a lot more on the Shazam lore. We get a lot more with the Shazam family in this. And I also really enjoyed the villains as well. I mean, they're kind of original characters and not really that unique, but you do have Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu playing them, so, you know, you're bound for at least some level of quality there. But I feel like Shazam 2, you know, it came out and James Gunn did say, oh, we love Zachary Levi in the role, we love the character of Shazam, you know, we want to kind of bring him over. But this movie didn't do very well at all. This movie did not make a profit for Warner Brothers. It absolutely flopped at the box office. And, you know, the first movie wasn't a huge smash out of the park success either. The first one, I believe, if I remember correctly, ended its box office run with around $400 million, which is nothing to snuff at for a lot of movies, but for a big comic book movie, you know, that's kind of not what these studios are looking for. And given the fact that the sequel is obviously theoretically supposed to produce more money than the original, the fact that it produced significantly less does say quite a lot. And I don't know why it is with Shazam. I don't know if it was just because maybe the first movie, it wasn't that profitable to begin with, and perhaps maybe people didn't like it that much. They didn't want to come back for the sequel. Like I say, the trailers, in my opinion, for this weren't that good. So I feel like the trailers maybe put people off. And again, a recurring problem we're going to have with all these films is I think audiences were very confused. Is this a part of the new continuity? Is it a part of the old continuity, which is even more confusing when it's a sequel? And also, I think in general, given the fact that by the time this movie had come out, there was already, you know, we knew this kind of reboot is coming. I just don't think people care anymore, you know, of this old continuity. Even general audiences who might have heard about it have just gone, well, what's the point of seeing this movie if it's going to be erased, like if it's completely pointless? And while there's a for and against for that. I mean, on the one hand, movies should stand on their own. It shouldn't be an important thing to the movie to be like, oh, well, if the cinematic universe that it's a part of is no longer active, then the movie is irrelevant. Like, the movie can still be enjoyed whether or not it's in a universe or not. And like I say, I personally had a good time with it. But I do get the argument, people are saying, well, should I really go out and spend my hard-earned money to go and see and, buy a ticket for this movie if it's kind of irrelevant and kind of pointless, especially when cinematic universes are so hot right now. Audiences go crazy for them. If this isn't leading to anything, is there really a point? And I feel like that was part of it. I feel like there's many, many reasons why Shazam 2 just wasn't profitable. And I feel like they all kind of lead back to that reboot, which is a shame because, like I say, I think really this movie, I know a lot of people don't really like it that much. I personally enjoyed it and I thought it was a good time and a decent sequel to what was a really fun original film. And then we jump to June, which brought us the long-awaited The Flash. Now, The Flash. This is an interesting one. Now, The Flash, obviously, long before all this DC drama, The Flash was a film that was in development hell for years. This film was originally slated to come out in 2018. That's crazy. 2018 for The Flash. And, what's absolutely insane is I remember this movie was announced back in 2014, right after the premiere of the Flash TV show. And the hilarious thing is that the Flash TV show has been through 9 seasons before this movie came out. We got through, and it's ended, by the way, so, the entirety of the Flash TV series came and went in the time of this movie being announced and releasing in theaters, which is crazy. Now, as I said earlier, James Gunn himself described this movie as the reset point for the DC universe. I don't know what he's talking about. This movie is absolutely 100% a part of the old continuity. So is Shazam, by the way. If there's any questions about, what continuity these movies are a part of, this is absolutely a part of the old continuity, as is this. This movie, it stars Ezra Miller, who obviously has all his drama going on as well at the time. Stars Ezra Miller as the Flash, who of course played the Flash in the previous continuity. It starts with cameos from Ben Affleck as Batman and Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and the movie then goes on from there. And while the movie does end in a interesting place, it also gives really no sense of direction in regards to where the universe is going. This being described as the reset point really is completely flawed because the ending of the movie, the reset point, really gives us nothing to go on. Now, overall, in terms of the quality of the movie, I thought it was pretty fun. It's not amazing, but I think it's a really entertaining film. It's fun. I think it's a nice little send-off for the DCEU as we know it, especially because I feel like, the opening scene of this movie is absolutely awesome, where we've got a big action scene with The Flash and Ben Affleck coming back one final time as Batman, who is like a personal favourite Batman actor of mine. I love Ben Affleck, and he's amazing in this. And like I say, you get a little cameo from Gal Gadot as well, which is really nice. And then the movie obviously goes on its time travel shenanigans, where we get Michael Keaton coming back as Batman, and we get the Sasha Calle version of Supergirl, and it kind of becomes obviously like a multiverse story. I think overall the film is a good time. I think it's fun, it's entertaining, despite the sort of ending of the movie where you have the all the CGI cameos and stuff, which I cannot defend. It was awful. Not only did it look terrible CGI wise, but it was also kind of immoral. Like some of the characters they included in that end sequence was pretty horrific, to be honest. They could have done so many different... They could have gone in so many other ways there, rather than the way they did, and I'm shocked that, that kind of went through and people were like, yeah, that's fine. But I feel like, this movie, despite its quality, again, absolutely flopped at the box office. This is one of the biggest comic book movie flops of all time. And again, like Shazam, I think there's a number of reasons. For one, do people care? I don't know. I mean, people don't really care about this old universe, it seems, so why would they watch this movie when it is clearly a part of the old universe? And also, I think more importantly with this film in particular, obviously, it starred Ezra Miller. Now, I think the marketing team, in fairness, did the very best they could to kind of work around that, because obviously, he is the star of the movie. There's not a lot you can do about that. And they couldn't exactly reshoot the whole thing. The movie had already cost too much money. Like, this movie cost $300 million, so it already cost too much as it is. They can't reshoot it. So the marketing team, obviously, he is in the trailers and stuff. He is there. but they really push like the other elements of the film, like Supergirl, who really isn't in the movie that much, but like you see most of Supergirl's stuff in the trailers, to be honest. And of course, Michael Keaton returning as Batman, which was a big thing. And, despite all that exciting stuff, despite Michael Keaton coming back, did anybody watch it? Not really. And I just think that's wild because, again, I think that this film had, it's a big tentpole comic book movie with a big character returning, which is, again, another huge thing. I said cinematic universes are huge right now. So are big legacy actors returning. So the fact you have the OG cinematic Batman returning, and it did really nothing, it didn't create any ripples, is pretty crazy. And, in a way it makes me sad because this movie, I think, does have some merit to it. And also, as a huge character as a huge fan of the character of the Flash, with this being the Flash's first solo film, I really wanted it to do well. And even though I'm not a huge fan of Ezra Miller's interpretation of the Flash, I just kind of wanted the Flash to kind of do well so that the Flash gets put into the public consciousness more than he already is. So the fact that the movie flopped, it made me very, very sad. And like I say, in terms of why it did badly, I think it just comes down to the fact that people didn't care. And also, despite the marketing doing its best, I just don't think people were interested in a movie starring Ezra Miller. And then we had Blue Beetle, which I do have a full review of this movie up on my film review channel, so I'll leave that linked in the comment section down below. Go check that out if you want to see my full thoughts on Blue Beetle. But Blue Beetle, for me, I think is the best of the three films. I really, really enjoyed Blue Beetle. I had a really good time with it. It's a very sweet, heartwarming film. It's got a lot of great new characters it introduces. I think that Jolo Maraduena as Jaime Reyes is a great piece of casting. And this being the first film after The Flash, after James Gunn's reset point, again, there were questions of, is this the first movie of James Gunn's DCU? Coming out of the movie, I still think it's painstakingly obvious that this was supposed to be a part of the DCEU originally. Obviously, this film wasn't even meant for theatres originally. It was supposed to be on HBO Max, and it was converted into a theatrical release. I think that James Gunn perhaps maybe got involved in the editing process somewhere and was like saying to the editors, perhaps, if there's references to other characters and stuff, take it out. Because there are references to Superman and Batman. But beyond that, the movie doesn't really have any strong ties necessarily to the DC universe of old. It kind of just throws out vague references, which, if they want to rework this film into the DCU, I think you could get away with that, especially because from what we know about the DCU, it's going to be an established universe already with a Batman, etc. So that kind of makes sense. But I feel like Blue Beetle, it was a really good film. It was the best of the three we've had so far. But once again, it absolutely flopped. I think when it comes to Blue Beetle, I think the reason why it flopped was much easier. I just think nobody knew the movie was coming out. Blue Beetle is not exactly a well-known character with any name recognition. He comes out on the screen, and I just don't think people look at him and go, "Oh yeah, I know who that is." Even a lot of hardcore comic book fans aren't particularly familiar with Blue Beetle. So I feel like that alone was a big thing that brought the movie down. Also, this was one of the first big major releases that came out following the strikes, and the fact that you had this cast of actors who weren't particularly big or well known, like Jolo Maraduena. He's most well known for Cobra Kai, but he's certainly not a household name. So the fact that this cast of slightly unknowns weren't able to go out there and promote the movie, I also think hurt it. And once again, with this technically being a part of the old continuity, I think people looked at Blue Beetle and went, is it worth it? Is it worth seeing? And even though I think Blue Beetle, it is relatively generic, like it does take a lot of different elements from a lot of different comic book movies, it makes it work. And I think that the cast are really the heart of that film. So the fact that people didn't come out and see it and get to fall in love with these characters is a shame. But I do think, out of all three of the films we've spoken about so far, I think Blue Beetle has by far the best chance of being brought over, just because the film isn't really connected at all. Despite the fact I feel like in an earlier cut of the movie, before the whole James Gunn stuff, I think maybe it might have been. I think they've edited the movie in a way where they can get away with it. And also, I think Jolo Maraduena, despite the fact the movie didn't do well, I think that for the people who did see it, he was really well loved. Like, everyone was like, he's great, he's fantastic, which he is. He's great as the character. He's a great leading man as well. So is this the first DCU movie? No, not really. But it could be. It could kind of be if you want it to be. We'll have to see, how deeply Blue Beetle gets brought into the universe going forward. But the movie flopped, and it's a real shame. So finally, let's talk about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We finally got a trailer for this the other week, and I was actually pretty impressed with the trailer because I'm not the biggest lover of the original Aquaman. I don't really think that movie is particularly great. I respect it from a certain degree because it just really went for it, but at the same time, I feel like the movie was a bit overlong and had very little substance to it. But this new one, I think, looks really cool because I think that this is going more in the direction I want it to, where it's still very silly and over the top, but we've got Black Manta actually being the main villain, which I think is a much better idea, because I think that Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is a tremendous actor, and I think that he works much better in the villain role. Obviously, he was kind of like a side villain in the original, but he's finally progressing into the main villain, and I also like that progression as well, rather than just kind of leaving him in the first movie and never seeing him again. I like the fact that he's kind of progressed into the primary antagonist. But also, Aquaman 2 is going to be a bromance film between Arthur Curry and Orm, which I'm really excited about because you've got Jason Momoa, who I've started to like a little bit more recently. Like, I really loved him in Fast X this year, so I'm open to this a little bit more. But also you've got King Orm, played by Patrick Wilson, who I absolutely love. And Patrick Wilson is so likable, because this is the thing, I don't think he was great in the original Aquaman, because I just don't think he played a villain particularly well. But he's so likable, and I love him so much as an actor. I think that he's going to work so much better in this capacity than he did in the original movie. And like I say, with these pieces all coming together in the right way, I feel like the Aquaman 2 is going to be a much better film than the original. Despite what we've heard about test screenings and people walking out and stuff, I feel like that this film is going to be superior to the original, but is it going to make money is the question. Because if we look at the track record of DC recently, Black Adam, Shazam 2, The Flash, Blue Beetle, you would say no. But what is interesting about Aquaman, if you remember, is it did make $1 billion at the box office in 2018, which I still find absolutely insane. It baffles me to this day. I don't mean that in a mean way. I just don't understand how that movie made $1 billion, because Aquaman is kind of a joke character, at least he was at that point in time, when it comes to general audiences. It came out in a very busy December. Like, it came out alongside films like Spider-Verse 1, Bumblebee, Mary Poppins Returns. I remember it being a very busy December, and it still made $1 billion. And I don't know, was it just word of mouth? Like, what made that movie make $1 billion? I still don't know to this day, to be honest with you. But either way, it did make $1 billion. So with that, is this movie going to do well? I mean, I think out of the 4 DC films we have this year, I do think Aquaman 2 has the potential to be the highest grossing by like a significant margin, just because of how badly the other 3 performed. And hopefully, if fans of the original are still there and still around and they come back for the sequel, it will surely make money. Surely. Unless it was a complete fluke and it doesn't happen again, which is, I'm also interested, go to the other side, the MCU. I'm interested to see how the Marvels performs in November because, again, Captain Marvel made $1 billion, and this is technically the sequel to Captain Marvel, but Marvel hasn't been performing quite as well as it normally does, and also I feel like that everything that came out, drama-wise with Captain Marvel makes me feel like perhaps that movie isn't going to follow suit, and I do wonder, did Captain Marvel only really make $1 billion because of the time it came out? Like, it literally was smack bang in the middle of Infinity War and Endgame, so did people go see it just based on the hype alone? We'll have to wait and see. But when it comes to Aquaman 2, I feel like there is a chance this movie is going to do well. Is it going to crack $1 billion again? I don't know. Because I still feel like there is that audience tendency of this movie was originally supposed to be a part of the old continuity. And I think James Gunn has said recently that... Or not James Gunn, sorry. James Wan, the director, has said recently that this film is structured and edited in a way where if they want to make this part of the new universe, then it can be, similarly to Blue Beetle. But again, there is just that, you're just waiting on the audience, really. Are they interested or not? And I feel like that is, I think Aquaman is kind of the biggest test for that, because the movie is a sequel to $1 billion film. So we'll have to wait and see with Aquaman, but I am impressed by the trailer. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also excited to see whether or not the film is going to perform for Warner Brothers. Is it actually going to turn a profit? So after all that, what has happened with DC? I think ultimately it's just this change in regime has affected the brand in a almost negative way, purely for the fact that I think audiences have heard this and have just gone, well, let's just wait out until we start getting these new films and they start again. And I feel like we're not going to see audience interest in DC pick up again until 2025 when Superman Legacy comes out. When that film comes out, it's going to be a big deal. We've got a new Superman. I feel like obviously there's still going to be your naysayers and obviously like your hardcore Snyder fans who love Henry Cavill and stuff like that. They probably are going to have a hate train towards the movie. But I think in terms of your general audience, it's going to be a big deal. A brand new Superman movie with a brand new actor as Superman, and also the start of, like, the proper start of the new DC universe. So I feel like, all these films we've had this year, they may not have performed well, but I feel like that is kind of DC's own fault. Due to the fact that not only have they ran this franchise into the ground, but they've also announced kind of way too early that they're rebooting it. They kind of just left these movies and threw them out into the fire just to be like, well, let's just see if we can get some money out of them while we've got them, because we can't just get rid of them. So I feel like it is kind of DC's own fault, but it's a shame because some of these movies, I think all of them that have come out this year have been pretty good. But what do you guys think? I know this was kind of a weird, rambly video, but it was just one that came into my head earlier today, and I thought, you know what, let's talk about that. So let me know your thoughts. What do you think happened with DC this year? Where do you feel like the blame lies? And also, let me know your thoughts on the films we've had this year, and are you excited for Aquaman 2? Whatever you think, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more comic book content just like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.